Welcome to Your College Bound Kid,
a podcast for parents, college counselors, students, and anyone who wants a weekly 90-minute deep dive into the world of college admissions.
My name is Dave. I'm a parent of a daughter in college, and we live in Chicago, Illinois.
My name is Lisa. I'm a clinical psychologist and a college counselor. I am a parent of a boy in elementary school, a girl in middle school, and a girl in college. After 30 years in Chicago, we recently moved to North Carolina.
My name is Mark. I'm a college coach in Atlanta and the parent of two daughters. Karis, a graduate of Davidson College, and she is the founder of the Spanish tutoring company, SpanishHelpToday.com. And Joy is a graduate of the University of Georgia, and she is getting her master's degree at North Carolina State University.
This week in the news, how Amherst College became a champion for community college transfer students. A great article by Yazmin Padilla of Inside Higher Ed. Our question from a listener is question about hooks for the podcast. Do schools view leadership as a hook? My daughter is a participant in a regional youth leadership program that is selective and well-regarded. She will have 3 years of escalating experience in leadership activities by the time she graduates. We are not aiming for an exclusive school, but rather are hoping for significant merit aid. That comes to us from Bobbi from Ohio. Our interview is with Roger Parrott, the president of Belhaven University in Jackson, Mississippi, on understanding Belhaven University. That is going to be a single-part interview. And our college spotlight is Roger Parrott's interview about Belhaven University. This week, we have a special 13-minute recommended resource about a new book and a new podcast about college admissions by Tim Fields of Emory University and Shereem Herndon Brown, an independent college counselor.
Dave, I forgot to give you credit, man. You've been getting Inside Higher Ed right for once. Forever it was Inside Higher Education. Inside Higher Education. You're up in your game.
That's right. One day I'll even put the S on Johns Hopkins.
No, that's never going to happen. Hey, happy Mother's Day, everybody. We're recording this literally on Mother's Day. And without mothers, guess what, Dave? There's no Your College Bound Kid. I mean, I look at our surveys, and they continue to come in. Thank you, everybody. You know, one listener had a suggestion. They said, put the survey link in the show notes. And so ever since we've done that, more and more surveys came in. I read about 7 or 8 this week. And I looked, our number of women listeners is 80.8%, so call it 81, and you know 99% of them are moms. So hope you guys get treated like queens today. We know how hard you work, and we appreciate you because there's no Your College Bound. I mean, I guess we could have one for guys, but what, like 10 people listening? I don't think so. So thanks, moms, for all you do.
Thank you, Mom.
Big announcement, Texas and Texas A&M. Both joining the Common Application. Actually, 50 schools, new schools, joined the Common App this year. When I say this year, I'm talking about for next year's admission class, including, here's an old admissions vernacular word from the past, 20 MSIs, minority serving institutions, places like North Carolina Central and others, HBCUs. But pretty big announcement, Texas and Texas A&M. You know, for so long, it's been the Apply Texas app. That's how you've applied to Texas. And so you know what that means. Expect surge in applicants to the Texas schools with them joining the Common App. And another big announcement, Texas and Texas A&M, amongst other schools in Texas, have announced that they will be test optional for 2023. Now, you know, I'm always a little leery when a school announces this late in the cycle. I mean, literally, this announcement came out in the Austin American-Statesman newspaper in the last week of April. That's pretty late. You can tell there was a lot of debate, had to ensue over it. But what's interesting is if you read the article, it's very clear that they're sort of patterning themselves after North Carolina, meaning we're looking at the numbers and we're looking at the surge of applicants when we've gone test optional. And we like the ability to shape the class with these extra applicants, so we don't want to walk away from it. You know, we haven't talked as much about Texas as we probably should, but they have a very unique system there. So UT automatically admits students in the top 6% of their class. And under state law, 75% of first-year students have to come from auto admission. And then they take another 15% of kids from Texas that don't come through this top 6% plans. And they review them holistically. And they admit oftentimes by major. So it's a very, very unique admission method they use there. But so big announcements coming out of Texas A&M and Texas. As I've been telling you, we're rolling out our new format effective in June. So Dave will be on here for 226, the last week in May, and then Susan Tree will be up June 2nd, our first week in June, and the next addition to our team, this one won't come as a surprise probably to our regular listeners, Vince Garcia. Vince was on the podcast twice as an interview, demonstrating his expertise in the state of California, and then he's the only one of our new team members that's actually done it in the news. He pitch hit for you, Dave, when you were celebrating your birthday there.
That's right.
We had Vince come in. But let me read his official bio, and then I'll make some comments. So Vince has more than 20 years of experience in college admissions, having evaluated applications for Occidental College, Pomona College, Cal Lutheran, UCLA, UC Berkeley, and UC San Diego. Additionally, Vince has worked with Belmont High School and Campbell High, provided college counseling for College Summit, for the Gates Millennial Scholarship, Matchlighters, National Hispanic Institute, Posse Foundation, and Questbridge. Vince has expertise in admissions in STEM admissions, athletics, learning differences, visual and performing arts. Vince has worked with Campus Pride, Dalai Lama Fellows, National HIV Scholars, Reaching Out MBA, National Merit Scholarship Corporation, the Point Foundation, and the Swarzman Scholars. Vince is the co-founder and CEO of Q&A College Admissions. And I just have to say, right from the start, like literally it feels like one of the very first episodes, Vince found our podcast, reached out, and has been a big cheerleader and supporter of everything we've done. Actually, was one of our very few first financial supporters of the podcast. And we've become friends. And rarely does a week go by when we're not at least texting each other. And he's one of the people that I reach out to, along with Susan, and somebody you'll be hearing about next week, when I'm in a dilemma, when I'm in a jam. And he's one of these people that I always feel smarter after every conversation that I've had. And we've had great listener feedback when he's been on. He's got a nice, lighthearted, easygoing style. And Vince and Susan, as well as who I'll announce next week, are all part of our College Counselor Confab. It's our college counselor support group where we all support each other that was birthed out of this podcast. So I think you'll love Vince. He'll be on most of the time. Susan will usually do the first week of the month, and Vince will do the second week of the month. So Vince Garcia, friends, see him. You'll see him on, if I can do the math, I guess June 9th, episode 228. All right, Dave, admissions tip. So,
Gotcha.
Summarize your application in one sentence. This is very powerful. You take your whole application and you say to yourself, I call it this, which piece of the puzzle are you going to be in the eyes of that admission office? It's very helpful to think this way because it'll focus your application. Another way I sometimes refer to it is, what is your compelling narrative? Why should a college enroll you? So, Dave, I want to talk a little bit about Lauren and her application. And if I say anything too personal, I want you to say, hey, cut that out. Edit it.
Nah, it's okay. She's not going to my school. I don't care.
Still a little bit of grudge match there that she rejected Princeton? Is that what I'm hearing?
That's right.
So Dave, on both sides of the family, Lauren has a history of breast cancer. And so Lauren developed some passion for doing research on the BRCA gene that leads to breast cancer. And she did. Dave, talk about the opportunity she had with that MacArthur Genius Fellowship. Was that at University of Chicago? Talk about that a little bit.
Oh, yeah. In her sophomore year, she had the ability to work with a MacArthur fellow, Dr. Olapati, in her lab. And it was a great opportunity, especially for a sophomore in high school, to spend 3.5 months doing oncogene research with her, which is great. And that really set her up for the next year where she got the Research Start Fellowship from Northwestern, extending her basic science research in breast cancer. So, she had the opportunity to do research at two great institutions, University of Chicago and at Northwestern, with some of the leading researchers in the field. So that was a great opportunity.
Yeah, and so in working with Lauren, her compelling narrative was, I'm a student who's had breast cancer greatly impact my life, and I care very deeply about it, and I'm committed to doing research to see if we can find a cure. Now, like Dave says, she got to Yale and decided, hey, I'm going to go in another direction. I'm going to be a Politico. But that's okay. She was authentic at the time. That's what she was thinking. And she built out a narrative, and it made her a very, very attractive applicant. Anything else you want to add to that, Dave?
No, I mean, obviously we're in a very STEM-oriented time. And the good news is there's never been as many opportunities to do research, both at the high school and the college level. So I encourage parents whose kids may be so inclined to really start looking at those opportunities, particularly in the freshman and sophomore years. It's gotten somewhat competitive now to get some of these things. So it's, the timing of your applications and being directed really counts. But also, especially with that first opportunity, if you happen to be near a college or a university or a community college, individually reaching out to the researchers and the professors to see what role your child can play in their lab. And, it doesn't have to be, authoring a paper or even just doing basic lab cleanup, lab assistance, library research. There's many roles your child can play. But it pays to be organized, to start early, and to be systematic in identifying the local resources where the research occurs, universities, colleges, so forth.
Yeah, and I've said before, if you want to know what some of the school's institutional priorities are, watch what they brag about when they have their announcements of their incoming class. And this is in no way, shape, or form meant to imply that everybody needs to do research. But it's very interesting looking at this year when the University of Pennsylvania announced their incoming class. One of the things they said, Dave, was more than 30% of our incoming class did some type of research in high school. So there you know. So there you go. I'm not saying everybody needs to do it, but just know that it is something that's valuable.
And it doesn't have to be just science research. There's social science research, and there was research with different museums and so forth. So it's research in general, not research specific to scientific fields in particular.
That's actually a really important point. I'm really glad you spoke up and meant that, because a lot of times people hear that, well, I'm not a sciencey person. I made up a word there, by the way, sciencey. But so what am I going to do? And so that's actually really important. So thanks for chiming in with that. All right, admissions vernacular. Our word is postponing. And postponing is just another term for taking a gap year. Not everybody calls it taking a gap year. Some of the admissions slang is kid is postponing. Postponing, taking a gap year, same thing. All right, or gap semester. You have to remember that. Not everybody takes a full gap year. Some do a gap semester. All right, the big number, and the big number is 107,040. And what is that? Well, there's a new survey that came out by Real Estate Witch. And this came out in March of 2022. And it looks at college students and it asks them, how much do you expect to make? And they broke it down by different college majors. So the journalist major said they expect to make $107,040 coming out of college. Guess what? The reality is the average is $44,800, showing a gap of 139% between the perception of what students think they're going to make and the reality. No wonder there's disillusionment with college if that's what people's expectations are. So I'm going to be talking about this a little bit more. For those of you who don't know, any financial support of our podcast at all, whatever gift you give, whether it's monthly or one time and there's no amount, then you get 12 additional bonus 10 to 15 minute audio messages every month, one a month delivered right to your email. And sometimes it's me and Dave. Sometimes it's I'm with Lisa. Sometimes I'm solo. But I'm going to go a little bit more in depth on this real estate witch survey for the May edition. But that's our big number. It's a big disconnect.
And I want to say that gap, $60,000 in expectations versus reality. You know what that means? Tell your mama not to rent out the basement. You may be needing it after college.
Or
keep the basement in reserve.
Or you might need a session with Lisa for therapy.
Absolutely.
Or maybe both. Maybe both. All right, Dave, take it away. We got a great article of the day, my friend.
And now it's time for Hot Topics in the News.
This is an article, it's a Q&A, and it is a very important article. It is How Amherst College Became a Champion for Community College Transfer Students. It's by Yazmin Padilla, and she basically states that every year more than 100,000 community college students transfer to private four-year universities. That's only about a third of those who started community college in the cohort 2 years earlier, and they think that this has a real opportunity for many colleges. And so they basically highlight Amherst College. And she says, quote, selective colleges that are hesitant to commit to a transfer program can learn from Amherst College in Massachusetts, which is consistently ranked as one of America's top liberal arts colleges. And Amherst now enrolls 10 to 15 community college transfer students a year out of a total of 495 students. And even though it's a small program at this point, it's a big commitment to the concept of transfers. So she starts off with a series of question and answers. And the first question is, how did Amherst become a transfer-friendly college? And it started with their president, Biddy Martin, who really pushed the institution to increasing representation and inclusion. And he would go so far as to host transfer students for lunches and tea at her house, and to really get more about the experience of what it was like to be a transfer student and communicating that to the Board of Trustees, faculty, and staff. And they all made an institutional commitment to bring more transfer students to that institution. And the question is, why did they want transfer students? And the faculty recognized that community college students brought a strong work ethic and a different perspective to classroom discussions. And the faculty very much supported the program and voiced how much they value having their students as part of the community. The next question they talk about is what strategies led to Amherst's success in enrolling community college students? And she answered that Amherst found that recruiting and enrolling these students required a different approach from traditional candidates, and that they did things like training counselors to think from the transfer students' experience, clearly sharing admission and financial information, and being transparent and flexible about credit transfers for transfer students. And they talk a little bit about how did Amherst approach the credit transfer system. And it said that students received an evaluation of credits that clearly states which courses will transfer, as well as the graduation date, class year, and financial aid package. And then she ends up when she says, what does Amherst support for community college transfer students look like? And it says, in addition to robust financial aid that covers tuition and non-tuition costs, Amherst provides a sense of community from day one. Students join a cohort of community college transfer students who meet each other through orientation and events like barbecues and visits to the campus. And they have access to a research center which supports first-generation, low-income, transfer, and veteran students. And so the real question is, why is this such an important article about transfer students? And I'm going to stop early and transfer this to you, Mark.
All right. Thanks, Dave, once again for that excellent summary. I'm going to try to hit 7 points. I'm going to try to hit them really fast. Some of them Dave has mentioned, some of them he hasn't, but I just want to touch on them 7 points really quickly in this article. The first is the power of philanthropy. I think that's something we can take away. Now, where does that come from? So everything started with Jack Kent Cooke. Now, who is Jack Kent Cooke? Jack Kent Cooke is actually from Hamilton, Ontario. It's about 30 minutes from where my sister lives and about an hour from where Dave grew up. And, after failing at starting a Major League Baseball team in Toronto and being turned down to have his own television station in Toronto, Cooke moved to the United States and he built an empire in broadcasting and professional sports. I mean, he was the owner of the Washington Redskins in the NFL, the Los Angeles Lakers in the NBA, the Los Angeles Kings in the NHL, the Los Angeles Wolves in United Soccer, and the Toronto Maple Leafs. And he also developed the Kia Forum in Inglewood, California, and the FedEx Field near Landover, Maryland. And when he passed away, which was a while ago now, he's literally given billions away. And his foundation, the Jack Kent Cooke Foundation, is set to give billions of dollars away to education, to gifted and talented under-resourced kids. So he started a Young Scholar program. I've worked with this program before and worked with students who have won this scholarship. $230 million has been given away for that scholarship. I've also worked with the second venture, which is the College Scholarship Program. That one has placed 3,000 kids in college and pay up to $20,000 for them, including all kinds of other enrichment experiences. And then he started this third program, which I haven't worked with yet, but I'm sure I will someday, but it's called the Undergraduate Transfer Scholarship. And this Undergraduate Transfer Scholarship, it identifies, it's a highly selective scholarship for the nation's top community college students, and it seeks to help them complete their bachelor's degree at selective 4-year colleges and universities. And so far, this program has given away $119 million. So why does it start there? So Jack Kent Cooke, the transfer program, was placing kids at Amherst. And that's where Amherst caught the vision. So my first point was the power of philanthropy. Without Cooke, Jack Kent Cooke and his foundation starting this program, none of this would have happened. So I think my first point is the power of philanthropy. The second point is that institutional change requires leadership. So Biddy Martin, who has been the president of Amherst, just recently announced stepping down. She caught the vision right away. Here's a quote from the article. President Martin has really pushed us past the point of representation and to a conversation of inclusion. She added that the president hosts transfer students for lunches and teas at her house. So second point starts with institutional change requires leadership. Third point, effective institutional change gets all stakeholders on board. So the article talks about how the faculty got on board, admissions got on board, the board of trustees got on board, support services, career services, everybody got on board. In fact, here's a quote. The board of trustees, faculty, and staff embody Martin's commitment to transfer. They're all committed. So that's my next point. Next, you got to think about diversity more broadly. So they're not just looking at race, class, gender, social class, and geography. They're looking at ideological diversity. They're looking at experiential diversity. And that's the kind of diversity that everybody should be looking at, whether you're building a business or you're in admissions. Here's a quote from the article. The faculty recognize that community college students bring a strong work ethic, and this is key. They bring a different perspective to classroom discussions. As the Jack Kent Cooke Foundation grant was ending, Amherst was faced with a big decision. The grant is running, it's ended, it's expired. We're going to move on to another college now. What does the article say? Faculty very much supported the program and voiced how much value that these students in their classroom and voiced how much they value having these students in their classrooms and as part of the community. And then it says, these voices, meaning the faculty, were incredibly influential in Amherst deciding to continue with the program and use their own institutional aid once the Jack Kent Cooke money ran out and Jack Kent Cooke was on to support another college. Next point I want to make is the power of affinity groups. So affinity groups sometimes are considered controversial. I don't think they're controversial at all. I mean, well, I'm not the person to say what's controversial and what's not, Dave, but I don't think they should be controversial. So what affinity groups is they take people who are minorities, meaning not in the majority, and they build a support system for them so that you can find other people who are like you. And so that helps you not feel imposter syndrome and feel like you actually belong on a campus. So the article said Amherst provide a sense of community from day one Students joined a cohort of other community college transfer students who met in orientations with barbecues and visits to campus. They have access to Class Access and Resource Center, which supplies first-gen, low-income transfer and veteran students. They host welcome dinners and alumni panels. And it goes on to say that designing a transfer-friendly campus does not require reinventing everything, but rather just slightly revising some programs to meet needs and interests of transfer students. So I think the place where affinity groups gets uncomfortable is people always feel uncomfortable and queasy about race. So when I was a freshman at Michigan State, I was president of the Black Student Association. And we had to meet with, I can't remember the name of the person, but it was like the person that would be almost like your student body president on the college side. And so we had to have regular meetings. And I got along really, really well with the person. Her name was Maureen. But one day I said, something seems like it's bothering you. And she said something to the effect of, okay, I'm just going to be honest. I really don't think we're so different that you need to have your own organization. And she just didn't understand. You have people, I was not one of them, but you have people that were coming from all Black communities. And this is the first time they've ever been in a predominantly white, organization. And it was completely foreign to them. And they needed a place where they could go and it could feel like home. And that kind of thing. Some people perceive that as dividing the campus and balkanizing your community. But actually, you're really helping people feel like this is their space and they can be at home here and to get a comfort level. And what you're doing is you're going to increase your graduation rate, increase your retention, increase your student satisfaction. I have 2 more points to make, Dave, but anything you want to say so far about any of the points I made?
No, continue, because I'll discuss once you've wrapped up, because I think we're on the same track again.
All right, I got 2 more points to make, and then I'll see what's going on in that big cranium of yours over there, man. All right, so the 6th point I want to make is, and actually Vince and I are going to talk about this in his first article in an episode 228, but we'll come at it from a different perspective. We'll be focusing on one thing a school in New Jersey is doing very effectively to turn around their admissions numbers. But the point is this: we hear a lot about the demographic cliff and the birth dearth, and how there's less kids being born and less kids are going to college, and there's going to lead to closures and mergers and downsizing. And Dave and we've talked about that so many different times, right? It's important. It's a very, very, very important topic in higher ed. But what I'm here to say is if you think outside the box and don't just exclusively think that high school seniors who come residentially and live on your campus are your only recruiting grounds, then the world's your oyster, because there's all kinds of opportunities out there. And I'm actually going to be interviewing 2 community college leaders. One is a president and one is a mover and shaker in the community college world. And that's because I was stunned to find out, Dave, that more than 50% of college students at some point go to community college. More than 50%. So there's a huge recruiting turf that has almost been untapped. And there's other opportunities out there as well. One thing we haven't talked about, but the article talks about how Amherst has reached out to veterans, as another community. And then, of course, we have just your non-traditional part-time adult worker who's 35 and has a job, and they need something online. And there's all kinds of different opportunities if you look outside of the box. And so, my last point I want to make is, after all this approbation we've heaped on Amherst, I do want to say I understand why my West Coast friends, and Vince has been really helpful in talking with him about this. He's always sensitizing me to East Coast bias and pointing it out. And he's helped sensitize me to it. Sylvia has as well. Sylvia Borgo, I'm referring to, is another member of our team. It does college spotlights for us and occasionally comes in and joins us in host role. So Amherst is taking 10 to 15 students, Dave. That's it, from community colleges. That's a max of 3% of their whole student body. Okay? If it's 15, it's 3% of their incoming class. If it's not the whole student body, but the incoming class. So they take about 495 kids in their incoming class. If it's 15 kids, it's 3%. If it's 10 kids, it's 2%. So they get this whole article in Inside Higher Ed, and listen, this does not negate everything I've said. Everything I've said, I stand by. But if I'm on the West Coast, I'm screaming. UCLA and Berkeley take about 30% of their kids through transfer, through the community college system. And you said, well, Amherst is a private school. Those are public schools. Guess what? USC takes thousands of transfers every year.
And the Florida system actually is very good for transfers as well.
Right. And so now I get the article because in terms of elite private liberal arts and science schools, this is new. Like if you were to compare these numbers to Amherst competitors in that realm, they're high. But still, you can see East Coast bias here, right?
Yeah,
like,
huge.
Like, come on, man. I mean, Berkeley and UCLA and all these other schools, and like you said, Texas, Florida, are taking thousands of transfers. Why does Amherst get the article? So anyway, your thoughts, Dave. Anything, go take anywhere you want to go.
I'm glad you mentioned that because when I was reading the article and I was like 10 to 15 out of 495, I was like, boy, who'd they bribe to get top billing? But in transfers in general, I'm going to give a sports analogy. Remember the San Antonio Spurs, one of my favorite, the Manu Ginobili, Tony Parker, Tim Duncan. To me, transfer students were like the international students of the 1990s and 2000s NBA.
That's a good illustration.
Gems. Nobody knew about them. And all of a sudden, everybody's focusing on Duke and the college kids. And here comes Popovich bringing out some dude from South Africa. And in fact, Tony Parker was from France. I didn't even know they had some brothers playing basketball in France, And then they bring out Manu Ginobili, some Italian guy. And then Tim Duncan was from the Virgin Islands, still, American, but still not an island boy. And they built a great team. And now, international players are a bedrock of recruiting for the NBA. But it was a hidden resource. And why are transfer students so valuable? Well, number one, it's a proven commodity. This article tells you that by time they get to the point of actually applying, there's only about a third of those who started community college 2 years later. So these kids have been through the fire. They've proven themselves. They've tested themselves. You're getting a known product. They've survived it. They have skill sets. And more importantly, you have a huge base, 100,000 kids. If you're Amherst, you're just cherry picking. You're going through this whole and you're picking out the stars, the Tony Parkers, the Manu Ginobilis. So of course those kids are going to do great. And in an era where the schools are going to be increasingly pushed, especially when we believe they're going to get rid of affirmative action, to maintain a level of racial and economic diversity, transfer students are an invaluable resource. So I'm glad that it highlights it, but I agree with you. I really don't think that Amherst was really the poster child for this article when you have UCLA and University of Florida and Texas schools that are taking thousands and thousands of transfer students every year, and now they're highlighting like 10 to 15.
Right. Now, in fairness, they are talking about the supports that they got and an institution going through institutional change, like an institution realizing, oh my goodness, look at this swath of the population that we hadn't tapped into, and look how valuable they are. And there really is this experiential diversity that transfer kids bring, right? So for community college kids in particular, or in particular community college transfer kids, because Amherst is a very wealthy institution. So a lot of the talk is going to be, what are you going to do this summer? Oh, I'm going to France. I'm going to Switzerland, whatever, right? Jet setting around the world. And then, first of all, you often sometimes get some age diversity because sometimes the kids are older. But then someone speaks out and says, oh, well, I'm probably going to have to wait tables 12 hours a day, because my mom can't afford her insulin and I need to help pay for it. Like that's the kind of thing that gets injected into discussions, which is why the faculty rallied and said, please don't lose these kids. You don't know what they're doing to add to the educational value of my classroom. And that's this experiential diversity that is extremely important, and it oftentimes just gets overlooked, is experiential diversity.
And Mark, to that point, many transfer students come from urban areas. We have to point out that Amherst is in a fairly rural area that would not normally attract kids who have a city experience. We've already talked about the bias that a lot of students have against rural schools. So this is a way for Amherst in particular to get a much broader urban experience and perspective and so forth.
Yeah, and I would argue that they've been very effective with Questbridge and Posse and programs like that at attracting, because they have so much money and they have prestige. But this other piece because most of the time, not always, but most of the time people that go to community colleges, there's a couple of different reasons why they go, right? Oftentimes it's money. Like you can't afford to go live in a dorm somewhere. So you're certainly getting exposure to a certain economic slice of the country. Sometimes you're getting somebody that had a hiccup along the way, academically, and not necessarily because they weren't bright. It could have been for all kinds of reasons. We can't say everything on here, but Dave and I have really worked with a student from Florida in the past that we've helped, who's incredibly bright. And the challenges that we've seen him have to go through, at one point, his mom was, house cleaning to pay bills. Income for the family was in the teens. That's right, under $20,000 in the teens. And the student is working, taking 5-6 APs, working 32 plus hours, helping his mom with the housekeeping business and literally falling asleep in exams in class. And we've seen, and so that's a whole different kind of diversity that you're getting. And I think that, I don't think there's enough talk about experiential diversity. And I'll tell you what, Amherst, I will give them credit. They're a lot of times on the forefront of a lot of different things. I've seen that over the years, what they've done. And I'm not saying it's always been that way, but I feel like it's been that way in the last 30 or 40 years. And bold stance they took on legacy admissions. Bold stance. I realized Johns Hopkins had already done that before them, but very, very few schools that they overlap with got rid of legacy admissions. You understand, the alumni are powerful at these schools. They're a lot of your donor base. And one thing they're hoping is that their kid's going to get an advantage in getting in. And they jettisoned it, and it's causing an outcry across the country from other people. Why can't we do it? And so I do give them credit for, if they're going to do it, they're going to do it well. And you're not just, because one of the things when I was in admissions we used to talk about is you don't want to invite people to a party, but then they can't even have any birthday cake, right? In other words, if you're going to take students, then we need to make them full citizens of this community and throw all of our resources at them to support them in every way, so that they have the best possible experience. And for that, I want to really shout them out, because now, it helps when you have, multi-billion-dollar endowment. You can do certain things for 1,900 kids that you can't do if you're sitting on like 1/100th of that or 1/50th of that. But I just want to shout out this experiential diversity. And the other thing I want to say is I see this as a trend, Dave. People are just coming to realize that community college kids are smart. They bring a unique type of diversity that our other students can learn so much from them. And I'm going to predict right now that you'll see this as a growing trend, that just like you're seeing schools go to more hybrid models of learning and online learning and tapping into more non-traditional students that way, just like you're seeing schools go to more virtual visits and beefing up their virtual presentations. Watch what happens over the next 5 to 10 years as more and more and more schools realize, why were we not prioritizing community college students in our recruitment?
And now it's time for a question from one of our listeners.
Lisa, any updates from Caribou, North Carolina?
Oh, well, everything's looking green here. A few weeks ago, I decided the pollen season was over, but I think my decision like that is sort of how America has been about COVID. Like, just because you decide it's over does not mean it's not over. So I'm just vacuuming yellow stuff off of my outdoor couch all the time now, because I refuse to acknowledge the truth. But hopefully it'll be over soon, and then it'll be too hot to sit outside. So there you go.
Tell me about it. I've never said this on the podcast before, but I have some of the worst pollen allergies. I went to get tested when we were in Pennsylvania, and have you ever gone to that allergy test where they?
Yes, it's super fun. Yeah.
Well, I started swelling up so badly they had to I'm not a medical guy. I need Dave here. Inject that thing in me so I wouldn't.
They had to EpiPen you.
Yes, so I wouldn't go unconscious. And then they said I had one of the 5% of the worst cases. So I've been suffering over here with the pollen as well. But life is good. Life is good. So listen, I like to go back to my favorite topic, right? What I think would surprise people if they were in admissions. And I'm going to share one that's similar to one I shared a few weeks ago, but it's a little different. So a few weeks ago, I talked about COVID grace, a term that an admission officer gave me, and how impressed I've been with schools' ability to overlook some modest grades because of Zoom school or COVID or whatever. So this is similar to that, but it's different. I'm equally impressed with how schools show grace to people that had a poor ninth grade. Like a poor ninth grade, I don't want to be seeing, I'm sure MIT and Princeton don't want to be seeing D's and F's, but it's just so long ago that you've just got so much of an opportunity to prove yourself, right? 10th, 11th, half of 12th. It's just really easy. It's understandable. You're going through this transition to this new environment. You can put something in the additional information section to explain the transition. And if you've proven yourself in the rest of the grades, I see some pretty selective schools that admit kids that have some pretty low grades. And I think that would surprise people that I'm not saying ninth doesn't count. Don't hear that out there, everybody, because you're building your foundation. Please don't hear that. But just know that if you had some unfortunate grades in ninth, there's such an opportunity for you to prove yourself. And schools love a good upward trajectory.
Yeah, no, my own daughter was an example of that.
I remember that.
She did not do well in ninth grade.
I saw her transcript.
It was not pretty. I call that year mistakes were made, but, it's like the transition to high school and the increased organization that it took. It really threw her for a loop, but she got herself together in 10th and 11th. And then those C's were never repeated. And, her grades just kept going up and up each semester as she got the hang of it. And I don't think it really harmed her at any of the schools she applied to in the end.
I mean, she got in a lot of really selective schools. She did really well in the process.
Yeah.
And you're actually a great example of that, because that's not a new thing. I say this is something I think might surprise people. That's not some new COVID thing. This is was true 10 years ago, right? It's just.
Yeah. And California, the UC schools don't even look at it.
Well, they would say that they don't even put it into the GPA, right? So they create a GPA off 10th and 11th. Exclusively. But you're right. The California schools are even Stanford is very outspoken about it, and I think that's the right attitude. I mean, you have plenty, all of 10th, all of 11th, in many cases, half of 12th, when classes are even harder. It's plenty of time for people to prove their ability to handle school. So why do you need to go back to when somebody was 14?
Yeah. I mean, it's just like that whole thing we were talking about, with mental health in kids. I mean, they're not machines.
Correct.
They're imperfect, maturing children, so they're going to make mistakes, and, that's really how you learn. But somehow we've gotten in our minds that there is no room for error.
Well, that's one reason I wanted to emphasize these things, right? Because there's so much stress about getting in school. And so I said, I think some of the ones that may be more encouraging to people. But before we dive into the question today, Lisa, I wanted to go back to what you covered last week when we looked at that article, Why Are Teens So Sad? And there was one question that bothered me I never asked you. And so I want to ask you now. And it has to do with in the social comparison piece. It particularly pointed out that girls suffer more with this than boys because girls are more conscious of what other people think about them.
Yes.
And this is something I've heard all the time. Like I've heard this explained even as a reason why girls get better grades in school, because girls are more wired to want to please the teacher. And the boys like, I don't care. I want to kick a soccer ball kind of thing. And so what I wanted to ask you is, in your experience, is that true? Or is that just like a gender stereotype that's not true?
Well, I think like obviously no, theory fits everyone, but I think for the most part, girls are socialized to be very alert about how other people respond to them and to not upset or anger them. And this is in all kinds of ways. I think that, we've talked a lot before that like girls in particular have a pressure to be perfect, that you have to be really well behaved. You have to be pretty. You have to be smart. You have to be polite. It's great if you're good at a sport or can play a,
Right.
instrument really well. Like it's all, it all has to happen. I don't think boys feel that same pressure. And there's like positive things from that pressure, like better grades, better performance, but perhaps like psychologically, it's more difficult. But when you take that and you add Instagram and TikTok and all of this, the comparisons and, you're comparing yourself to not actually a real person. You're comparing yourself to a curated image of a person. It just can really heighten that perfectionism. But honestly, like, I think that I always tell my female clients that I think that not wanting to upset people is how the patriarchy gets installed in women.
That's deep.
Because I feel like that, we are always socialized to be nice. Like if you and I went to go argue with the clerk at a store, like you would just be, asserting yourself, I'm a Karen, right? It's not acceptable for me to do that.
It's funny. I talk with Dave about this all the time because Dave and I talk about politics all the time. So he's always like throwing out people to me, like, do you think this person? And and my brother Norm's in this group too. And I've been very pessimistic about where this country is on sexism. And I think Hillary Clinton revealed that in so many different ways.
Yes.
And I'm always pointing that out, like a woman has to, particularly for president, like she has to be tough, but then if she's too tough, she gets called a bitch. You know what I mean?
Yeah. No.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I just advise people, you don't have to be nice, because being nice is being polite while someone's like, impinging on you or like impinging on your freedom or forcing you to do something you don't want. You don't have to be nice. You can be fair. You can be polite, but you have a right to have a voice and you have a right to assert yourself. And if women start doing that, like you get some pushback, but things start happening. But that's a path that is not apparent to us as women generally.
So it sounds like you would mostly agree with it,
I would obviously there's always a person,
Sure.
Who you can say like, oh, look at this, and they completely don't conform with any of that.
Sure. Good. Awesome. Good stuff. Thanks for that. Let's dive into our question for the day. Although I'm sure our listeners are like, I could listen to you all day, Lisa. So forget the question from the day.
Everyone feels that way about me, right?
Everyone who's listening to our podcast.
They're like, fast forward. Okay. But you won't want to fast forward through this question. It's coming to us from Bobbi from Ohio. And she asked a question about hooks. Do schools view leadership as a hook? My daughter is a participant in a regional youth leadership program that is selective and well regarded. She will have 3 years of escalating experience in leadership activities by the time she graduates. We are not aiming for an exclusive school, but rather hoping for significant merit aid.
So I'm going to say it's probably the most confusing thing I've ever said on this podcast, but then hopefully I'll decipher it and break it down and it won't be confusing.
This is going to be interesting.
So my original answer is yes, no, and it depends, but more yes than no. Now that you're totally confused, let's break it down. So what's the no case? The no case is that leadership is really subjective. And a lot of times when schools are talking about hooks, they're referring to things that are just really concrete and there's not as much subjectivity to it, right? So for example, you're either on the faculty or you're not. You're either a faculty kid or you're not a faculty kid. Like it's pretty clear cut. You're a recruited athlete or you're not. Like you might be an athlete in high school, but are you a recruited athlete that the coaches want? You are or you're not. High-level artistic talent. You're either good enough to play for the school's orchestra or not. And a lot of times faculty are involved in this, actually. schools, you submit stuff through Slide Room, and then it goes off to a faculty who evaluate the talent. They get back with the talent rating. They either say, yeah, this is somebody who can really help us, or they're not. Same for development, often called advancement, which is like the ability to give a really, really big gift. Like either it's a big enough gift to move the needle or it's not. Celebrity kid. It's not uncommon for schools to do special tours for celebrities. They don't want people like celebrity gazing on tour. It's very distracting. Like you make the list or you don't. And it goes on and on. Underrepresented students of color, you either are or you're not. Gender, if it's a school looking to increase its gender in a particular area, you're either you are or you're not. So with leadership, it's just a lot more subjective. And the things that are a lot more subjective oftentimes aren't referred to as hooks just because there'd be like 40 or 50 hooks. So that's kind of the no case. The maybe case is mission determines admission. This is critical. Like, I don't think I can ever emphasize that enough. So let me repeat it. Mission determines admission. So for schools that put a really strong emphasis on their mission, on leadership, then it pops, right? It really pops in a major way. Take a place like the University of Richmond. They have the Jepson School of Leadership Studies. It's the first ever undergraduate school of leadership studies in the world. And I know from sending kids there for years, like when you send a kid there that's a leader, they just like do really, really well in their admission process. They're the ones that are getting all their big merit scholarships. They just love leaders. And I mean, I've worked with so many student body presidents that have gone to that school because they so prioritize leadership. So mission determines admission. In a case like that, it's just such a major thing that, you may call it that, right? So that's the no and the maybe case. Now, what's the yes case? The yes case is when we're talking about hooks, we're really talking about, is there an extra thumb on the scale? Is it something that accrues to my child's benefit that helps them in a special kind of way other than just things like grades and scores? And whether we call it a hook or not, it does. Like, leadership is something that can result in an extra thumb on the scale. And that's really what the question is. So whether a school calls it a hook or not, sometimes they do, oftentimes they don't. But in reality, it still can accrue to your benefit in a way that can help your child in admission. And one of the key things that Bobbi said in this question was we're not looking at the most selective schools. And that's a really big point in this conversation, because when you start getting to the most selective, like so many people have those leadership titles. They founded this, they founded that, they were SBP, they were this, so that it's not like leadership doesn't count. It's just that your leadership has to be at such a high level to stand out, because so many people have, they're heads of clubs and heads of this and started this and started that, this charity, that, like, I'm not saying every single person has leadership, but it's not uncommon at all. Does that make sense, Lisa?
Oh, it absolutely does. I mean, of course, being in this leadership program, it sounds like a fantastic growth experience. And so, whether it was a hook or not, I think it's a great thing for Bobbi's daughter to do. But I do think that, if she's looking for merit aid, it would be important to really look at schools that value leadership, like University of Richmond. And there are other schools that have, similar values, and really try to target those with her list.
Yeah, and I want to develop the yes case more, because the yes case is very strong. You have to start with admissions and look at how our admissions decisions made, right? They're either made through what is oftentimes called formulaic admissions. I call it admissions by the numbers. You're crunching numbers. You have the test scores, you have the GPA, you're in. Or if it's test optional, you have the GPA, you're in. Some people call it guaranteed admissions. Some people call it quantitative admissions versus holistic, right? With holistic, you have to have those basic things to get through what I call getting through the security gate at the airport. But then that's not enough. You need these other factors. And for schools that are holistic, like, leadership can be a big deal. So this is the yes case. So let's just do a quick review. What are the factors that influence admissions decisions? There's 12 of them, main ones. Grades, right? Both academic courses and all courses. So that's a big one. Grade trends is a big one. Then we have rigor. That's a huge one. Test scores, right? For those who require test scores, they're going to be a big factor. If they're optional, then if you submit them, they're a big factor. So that's a big one. Essays, and I'm talking about all essays, personal statement, college-specific essays, as well as custom questions. That's a big one. Recommendations counselor, teacher, other, all of those. I'm counting all that under the recommendation rubric. Activities, what last week I referred to as commitments, like that's a big deal. Interview, if they have it, that's a big deal. If you're involved in audition, if you need an audition or a portfolio for where you're applying, then that's a big factor. Demonstrated interest would be number 10. And what are 11 and 12? Institutional priorities and personal qualities, IP and PQs. So this is where leadership comes in. This is like it can be a huge IP, institutional priority, or a personal quality. And these are incredibly valuable. This is what for schools that do holistic, this is what separates kids, right? Like you've already made it through. Your grades are good. Your grade trends are good. Your scores are good. Your rigor is good. Okay, now let's look at everything else. And what is it that separates kids? It's these other factors, right? It is the essays, the recommendations, the activities, the interviews, the portfolio, the demonstrated interest, and then the institutional priorities and the personal qualities. And when we talk about personal qualities, there's lots of them, right? Like a few weeks ago, we read that article about kindness by the janitor, and everybody at Dartmouth's admissions committee voted for that kid to get in. So like kindness is a big one. Integrity can be a big one. Glue kids, like the person that just can bring everybody together. That can be a big one. Adventuresome spirit, like that can be like the person that's willing to try new things and do all these adventuresome things. Grit, being interesting, unique and interesting. Intellectual curiosity, and that's not all of them, but those are like 7. But leadership tends to be one of the really prized ones within this personal qualities and within the institutional priorities. So the point is like whether you call it a hook or not, what you're really asking is, will it be a factor that can positively influence the decision? And the answer is yes for schools that do holistic admissions. So hopefully I cleared up hopefully that was better than my yes, no, and maybe answer that I started
no,
with.
I think, that's life, right? I know there are some schools too that have specific leadership fellowships and leadership programs that Bobbi's daughter might be an excellent candidate for if she wants to continue learning in the leadership realm. So you mentioned Richmond. I know Elon has a leadership fellowship that kids can apply for. I mean, there's other schools with that too.
Sure.
So
and one thing you can look for is, are there leadership scholarships? Like that's that's oftentimes a good indication. Now, I would not assume that if you don't see an explicit leadership scholarship, that doesn't mean leadership doesn't matter, because leadership is really valuable. It really is. Like, I mean, it's very valuable and is valued by schools because you have the ability to be an influencer. And that really, if they feel like you have positive leadership and you're pulling people in the right direction, that you can elevate the whole culture of a dorm. Especially for schools that are really residential and they're trying to have a certain kind of community. So I think that Bobbi should be encouraged by this answer. I will say this. You really have to look at merit scholarships. You really need to look at the criteria, because so many merit scholarships, a lot of them, particularly the ones that are just given out with admission, a lot of them are really basing a lot of that just off your academic stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Like the ones that, some of them are looking at everything, right? But those are oftentimes the ones where you have to apply to. Some of the ones are automatic merit scholarship just off your application. That can be holistic, especially if they've looked at everything. But a lot of times the ones where there's a separate application, maybe an interview, all that, maybe an extra essay, those are the ones where I find that leadership tends to be really correlated to merit money. Any other thoughts, comments? Anything else you want to add on this?
No, I think it makes a lot of sense. It's a great question.
Yeah, and there's some cool things in here. So she said she will have 3 years. One of the things I liked was this word, escalating experience. So that's a big deal because, that means you're, doing more and more and more. And that actually matters a lot too. It's like, just like your grade trend, what's your like extracurricular trend? What's your leadership trend? And once again, good for Bobbi to have knowledge that her kid would be better off not in an exclusive school. Like, that's good for her to know that. Part of what we need to do is know our kids. And exclusive schools are for some kids and not for everybody. And so she knows her child, and I always admire when people know their child. And so I think you're absolutely on the right path. She did say we're hoping for significant merit aid. I really would underscore that you learn for all of your schools what criteria is used for merit aid. And sometimes that's explicit on websites and sometimes it's not. So that would be my one challenge to Bobbi is for all the schools you're looking at, find out what criteria is used to determine if merit aid is allocated.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. Well, you know what? Next week, Lisa, it's bonus content for me. You know, I'm up every 10 weeks and you're up every 10 weeks, right? And I'm gonna be talking about tips to consider when trying to decide who to ask to write your recommendation letters.
No, that'll be a good one and very timely indeed.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I kind of wish I could have got in a little earlier because one of the students I'm working with this year, their school imposed a April 15th deadline on when they needed to ask their recommenders. But that's not normal. That's the soonest that I've seen. So hopefully for most people, you know, they'll be okay. And I know not everybody that listens is a junior anyway. We have, you know, people of all ages. So look forward to that. See you next week.
Thank you. See you next week.
And now this week's interview with a special guest.
Friends, for the last 2 weeks, you've heard Dr. Roger Parrott talk about factors shaping and influencing higher ed and what keeps presidents up at night. Now we transition to talk about Belhaven University. And Dr. Parrott shares some exceptional programs that they have that I don't know anybody else that has a couple of the programs that they have. So listen and enjoy. I think you're going to learn something. Well, let's transition to Belhaven. You've kind of told us how personal touch you offered there with that students can contact you directly. But in addition to that, give us the 3 to 4 minute high level overview of who Belhaven is.
I'd love to. I love this institution. It's such a special place. You know, I mentioned the 4 S's of where higher education is going. I also have 4 C's of where that describe Belhaven. Instead of size, sizzle, sports, and status, we're interested in character, community, curriculum, and Christ. Those are the things that drive us. We want to be an institution that really builds values into a student's life so they're prepared for the tests of life when they come, not if they come, they will come, and build those kind of strengths into them. And so, that kind of is a foundational issue for us. We're as a Christian institution, we're very called to what we do. We have a deep commitment to what we do because of that, and that goes across the board within the institution. I a few years ago was coming across campus, and there were 2 maintenance guys down in a deep hole, and they were clearly digging up a broken pipe, and they were standing down there in muddy water up to their knees. And I kind of just trying to be nice, and I came to the edge of that pit, and I said, "Guys, what are you doing?" And they said, "We're educating students for the Lord." And I said, "Yeah, that's it." So across the campus, that's kind of the spirit of who we are. But I mentioned, ask what required of students, of all students, to tell you the character of the college. Well, what we require of all students is we require a freshman course called BU 101, and that's designed to identify students' gifts and build on those gifts to help them for success in college and in life, because we believe God uniquely gifted everybody. If we can understand their gifts and free those gifts, they're going to be successful. But colleges tend to be pretty dumb, and what we do is we get everybody in, we test them, we find out what you're really bad at and give you a bunch of that. And we do it the other way. We find out what you're good at, and let's build on that. Second thing we require of everybody is in our sophomore year, we have what we call our worldview curriculum, where we take history, literature, philosophy, and major themes of the Bible and weave those together in an understanding of how worldviews have developed and how a Christian worldview is distinctive. The third thing we require of everybody is chapel. It's on Tuesday morning. It's not a substitute for church, but it's a time for 45 minutes to come together as a campus and worship, and I lead it personally because it's that important to us to have that time to be together. And the last thing we require of everybody is a capstone course in their senior year called Kingdom Life, and that is a course designed how to balance their family calling with their career calling. Because if they're not happy at home, it doesn't matter how successful a career is, they're not going to be happy. And we're one of only 2 schools in the nation who require a course in marriage and family for graduation. That tells you what we value. We value gifts, we value worldview, we value worship, and we value the family. And again, you take those things to anybody. But, Belhaven is uniquely known in the arts. We've got an international reputation in the arts. There are only 36 schools in America that have been nationally accredited in all 4 of the major arts: music, theater, visual art, and dance. And we're one of those 36. So it's us and Cal State and Ohio State and Juilliard. We're the only Christian college working at this really high level in the arts. And, so about a third of our students are in the arts, and it is kind of unique. We're really strong in STEM. A whole STEM arena is really a strong area for us. And the way I measure STEM is this. Everybody says they're strong in STEM, but here's the way I measure it. I ask and have the faculty ask our students who go off to med school after the first year, come back, tell us how you did. And consistently they say, I was better equipped than my peers in my class at med school. And that to me is a measure of a really good STEM program. Belhaven, it's a charming campus. It's a pretty campus. That's not a reason to go to school, but it sure is a nice place to live. But experienced faculty, we don't use teaching assistants, which is a whole nother issue for higher education. It's a grace-filled community because we are a Christian community that kind of loves people, accepts people where they are. So it's a wonderful place to be. It's probably not for everybody. We couldn't take them all. But for the student who fits right, for that kind of a campus, and we're in the capital city, so we have all the resources of the city, but we're in a historic neighborhood, so we're kind of separated from that in a lovely spot.
I want to follow up on the Christian piece. So some schools require like a Christian profession of faith for admission, and some schools say, listen, that's not a requirement, but we're unapologetically Christian and just know, we're not changing, and if you're comfortable with our vision, that's fine, but people may be of different faiths. And so that's sort of part one question. And then second, is there a denominational affiliation at all?
I think you articulated it well, and we would be in that second category where we do not require profession of faith. We're unapologetic about who we are. We are clearly a Christian institution, but it's not a place where you're going to feel like you're getting the Bible thumped over your head every day. At the same time, we're going to build biblical themes and understanding into every piece of curriculum so we understand how God designed the world. Now, Christian schools come at a whole spectrum. Some can be very, very narrow, very demanding. You can't ask the questions. You can't raise your concerns about faith, and it's kind of a Sunday school approach. And then others are at the other end of the spectrum where they're Christian in name and heritage, but they don't really live it out at all. We're very active about who we are in faith, as you've well articulated, and we have students come from a variety of denominations. We are a Presbyterian founded school, heritage, but as we say in Mississippi, we have more Baptists than we have people. So we're primarily, we got a lot of Baptist students, but we got students of all denominations. We have Catholic students. We've got students who don't have a profession of faith. I asked in chapel one day, I said, if you don't have a Bible, come see me and I want to make sure you get one. And I had 7 or 8 students come by and we got them a Bible, and that's fine. And so we want students to be accepted where they are. And expressions of faith need to be what God's doing in their life, not what we're trying to impose on them. So it's a wonderful place in that kind of environment, because I call it a grace-filled community. Christians can be really strong about truth. But when John described Jesus, he said he came full of grace and truth. And we want to hit everybody over the head with our truth. Well, how about we hit them over the head with some of our grace as much? And if we'll be as graceful as we're committed to truth, maybe they actually listen to our truth. So we're a very grace-oriented institution, and we're committed to truth, but we're just as committed to grace, and it shows every day on the campus.
What about experiential education? I'm referring to things here, internships, co-ops, study abroad, research opportunities. How would you say Belhaven does when it comes to experiential learning by doing?
I think we do as much as a student wants to do. And, that's a great part for our students, is they really every student's not the same. We don't want to put them into our box. And so we let's build on their gifts and who they are. So if you're come as a dancer, yeah, you're going to get professional audition opportunities. You're going to work with professional settings, all that kind of stuff. If you come in STEM and you want to do research with us or through the University Medical School across the street, we can do that. Business, we get into internships and stuff. Our international studies we don't have international business or international this or that or international missions. We have international studies, which means you can put it with any major you want to put it with. So we love building around an individual student's need, not just making them fit into our program.
No, I love that. I want to go back into the arts a little bit more because that is a niche. Would you say there's some programs in the arts that are stronger than others at Belhaven?
We're well known for our dance program,
Okay.
and it is pretty remarkable. There's kind of a dance has kind of like basketball does, kind of the Final Four of dance, and where they have competition and top collegiate schools at the Kennedy Center, and we've been pretty consistently every few years part of that, and that's very unusual. I think we've had probably a better record than most schools have had, even the very top schools. I've got a new faculty member who came from did her master's degree at at Tisch in New York, which is, the tops of the tops in the arts. And I said, tell me, how do you find our students compared to the students at Tisch? She said, oh, they're every bit as capable as the kind of students who are at Tisch, except they're so driven by a mission and a passion. She said they're so engaged. And so, we really do work at high levels in the arts, and we've got these programs that are nationally accredited, and there are other arts programs that don't have a national accreditation. National accreditation is not easy to earn, and it sure isn't easy to earn all four of them. But like our creative writing program, we're in Mississippi, and Eudora Welty lived across the street from us, and Faulkner and all that goes to Mississippi. So we developed creative writing, and it's been very successful. And one of our famous authors is Angie Thomas, who a lot of people know as the author of The Hate You Give. And I think she has 3 books on the New York Times bestseller list currently, and has 3 movies of all books. And
Wow.
Angie developed that. I remember when Angie came, she was a quiet little kind of student from the community, from a very disadvantaged background, and we loved and cared for her. And that project, the Hate You Give, that book was written as a short story for her senior project, and the faculty said, this is so good, you need to develop this into a novel, and it went from there. And Angie, of course, has kind of taken off. And I asked Angie to come see me a couple of years ago, and I said, Angie, I went back to look at what we did for you in scholarship, and we could have done a lot better. We should have done a lot better. And I said, Angie, I can't make it up to you now because you can buy and sell me 400 times over. But I said, what I want to do is I want to create a full ride Angie Thomas scholar every year who's a young writer from a background who will come and write about issues of justice and grace and the things that matter most. And so I think we're into our 3rd year now of an Angie Thomas scholar. So that's strong. Our film program really is a great program. It's just interesting. Here's the thing about the arts. Students love the arts. They have this passion for it. And the parents have been encouraging them. They're paying for all the lessons for all the years. Now they get to college, and the student says, I really want to major in music. I want to major in theater. I want to major in dance, or whatever it may be. And the family's going with trying to hold it back. And kind of the message they're saying is, that's really great. You want to do that, but what are you really going to do? How are you really going to make a living and not come home and live in my basement? And, we work with that all the time. My daughter's an actor, so I'm a parent of that school. And what we have found is over 90% of our graduates in the arts are actually working in the arts. Now, all of them are not Angie Thomas. They're not all multimillionaires. Sure. You can have a starving artist, but they're still working in the arts and working their passion. And we've done a couple other things. If we have a little time, I'll tell you about them, to really help those kind of students, with pretty dramatic steps we took. But to help those students because they can make it in the arts. And parents need to let go of that that concern and trust that their passion is going to give them great opportunities, and it really will. I told my daughter, who was in theater, I said, Madison, if you're never on a stage again, I think it was a great major for you. It taught you how to be confident into yourself, how to speak on your toes at a moment's notice. It taught you how to work in groups. It taught you how to deal with a project from beginning to end. It taught you how to lead. It taught you how to be a follower. All the good characteristics you want are taught out of that theater program. So even if she doesn't do theater, it's still a great major for her. Thankfully, she's able to do it. She's an audible narrator, but right now during COVID. But families don't need to be scared of the arts. They really can do it. And the great thing about Belhaven is when they come here, because we have all the arts, it's kind of a fifth art because it's a culture of the arts. And they're around artists of all kinds of different disciplines. And there's an interconnectedness there that really gives them a strength for going forward. I just saw a news report a couple days ago that one of our former students, who is a violinist, she went from here and she got Rice. She went to graduate school at Rice. They only give 2 scholarships a year in violin. She got one of them, and she was just named concert mistress for a major symphony orchestra. And she had that confidence coming out of Belhaven in a small environment. She had the chance to learn and to lead that she wouldn't have been in a different place. So they can make it in the arts. I believe very strongly in what the arts can do. And we have students come from all over the country for the arts. When they tell me, I'm here from California, I'm here from New York, I'm here from D.C., I say, oh, you're here for the arts, right? Yeah, I'm here for the arts.
Well, that's great. Every school should have some sort of signature program or something that differentiates them from everybody else. And obviously you have it with your approach to character and Christian education, but it's nice to know you also have it with in the classroom and outside the classroom as well. So that's exciting. Before I put you on the hot seat, Roger, anything at all that you haven't shared about Belhaven that you want our listeners to know?
Well, let me tell you 2 things that I think your listeners will appreciate and may want to follow up with us about. One is, again, it started with this arts. 3 years ago, I got worried about, we were seeing a drop-off in the arts nationally, and students are afraid to go in the arts, I think because they felt like they couldn't make a living in it. I said, what can we do for those art students? And I thought, well, let's give them a double major. And so they could double major in something else and make it for free. And then I thought, why not do it for everybody? So we did it for everybody. So Belhaven students who come to us as freshmen, they have to come as freshmen, not transfers. But if they come as freshmen and they stay all 4 years, if they are double major and it pushes them into their 5th year, they go tuition free for their 5th year.
Nice.
And it allows them, I saw a dancer the other day, she's dancing biology. I don't know what she's going to do with it. But you want to be chemistry and business. You want to be communications and theater. You want to be creative writing and English. That's fine. Do the double major and it won't cost a dime extra. And so that's a real unique feature. And when we did that, I thought every school in the country would follow us, and there's not one school who's done it. We're the only school doing this free, 5th year free for double majors. Then the other thing we've done that's very unique, and again, nobody's followed us in this, which I was surprised by, but as we were going into COVID, I was worried about our students and the disappointment of having to come with limitation and wear masks and all that kind of stuff then 2 years ago. And I thought, we've got to do something to give them hope for the future. And so we're giving every student who comes a free master's degree when they graduate. And they can take that. It's an online degree, so they can take it anytime, any place. We don't care if they take it right after or they take it 5 years, 10 years, 20 years later. Doesn't matter. And so a free master's degree is $15,000 to $25,000 value for students. And they don't have, that's, as you know, where a lot of the college debt gets built up is in master's degrees, not undergraduate. So that's for free. And we have them across a wide spectrum of programs. And like even, my daughter who was in theater, she did her master's in leadership with us. Well, she got a lot stronger resume from that. Or they can do an MBA, or they can do one in health sciences or in education. they can do that free master's degree. And we think it's a huge benefit to give them a free double major and a free master's degree. Puts our students in a different position than other schools. So to me, those kinds of things are fun for higher education, to really be responsive to what's going on around us.
Yeah, and as a former admission officer, I'd love to have those things in my pocket when I'm
Exactly.
out representing the school. Those are two incredibly strong perks. So I'm really glad you took the time to share that. This is exciting. So, Roger, you ready for the hot seat?
Sure.
What's your favorite chain restaurant?
Oh, it's unfortunately Chick-fil-A, because the peach milkshakes. I am a Southerner, and the peach milkshakes,
They get you. What's the worst purchase you ever made?
Oh, the worst purchase. Boy. Oh, that's a good question. I think it was probably the first car I ever bought. It was a good deal, but the floor rusted out when I was up in Detroit trying to pastor a church, and the floor rusted out. I had to put a board down to make it work.
That's funny. That's great. What's on your bucket list? Things you hope to accomplish while you're still here on the planet?
Well, we had planned a family trip to Greece before COVID hit. We had to cancel last minute. So getting to Greece is a big one. My wife teaches English, and one of her specialties is Greek literature. So she really wants to go there. But that and shooting par in golf someday, maybe those are the two.
Wow, you must be good to even have that as a goal.
It's getting better. COVID's helped.
I was thrilled when I broke 90. Dinner with anyone who's lived in the last 100 years, alive or not alive, who would you pick?
Oh, the last 100 years. You limited it. John Adams would be the one I'd pick if it doesn't have to be the last 100 years. But, I'd probably love to talk to Franklin Roosevelt for somebody to be president that long through such a time. Although Truman, in his first month in office, had probably the most significant presidency there is. So I might trade for Truman.
You sound like a bit of an historian there. I guess you got to look at the real presidents to pick up leadership ideas, right?
Right.
Favorite TV show?
Oh, my. Ted Lasso is just too hard to beat right now. You got to believe.
Best book you've read in the last 5 years?
Oh, boy. Best book in the last 5 years. What's the name of that book? I've got to get it for you because it really is terrific. I listen to books more than I read them.
That counts. That counts. My daughter does that.
So, for me, a lot of times I don't always have because I don't see the copy. I don't have it at the tip of my tongue. But there is an absolutely fabulous book. And it's written he's a doctoral student. Where am I? Here it is. How the Word is Passed, A Reckoning with the History of Slavery Across America. Clint Smith. Absolutely remarkable. Now, I'm in the Deep South, and I got to tell you, a lot of one of the advantages of the Deep South is our prices are lower. So people come here from Texas and California love us. They think we're the biggest discount there is. But when you understand the South and the culture and the uniqueness of the South, you have to understand that history in a way that really is of significance of how it shaped us. And Clint, I think, goes to specific places and talks about the history within those locations. And it's a powerful, powerful book. I really was pretty overwhelmed by it.
I haven't read that book yet, but I'll tell you what, you're the second guest we've had who's picked that book when I've asked that question.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
So now it has to get on my read list.
You've got to read it. You've got to read it.
Yeah. And the last question, what's your advice to a student out there listening to this about higher education or even about their future?
The best advice I'd give them is make a good decision going in and stick with it. What I think students are too easy when it gets tough to change schools. And I think the number one thing employers are looking for is people who will persevere. And if you go in with a resume with 3 different schools, it shows you can't stick with it. And if you make a mistake, you can switch. That's okay, maybe one. But persevere. College is wonderful. I've heard you say in the podcast, everybody says it's the best years of your life, and I'm kind of with you. It's great years of preparation. Hopefully not only best years of your life, but it ought to be fun. It ought to be good and all kinds of good stuff with it. And I think it is. But it's not always easy. And there are going to be times you get picked for the show lead, and other times you don't. And there are going to be times you get what you think you ought to get on a test, and other times you don't. And persevering through that, which again is what I love about Belhaven. We've got the support to help people press on and to be successful and to learn through those tough times. If we only learn through the good times, we haven't learned a lot. We learn most through those tough times. And so helping make a good decision about college and then stick with it and stay with it through the end.
Roger, this is fantastic, and I really appreciate your emphasis on that. That's such a good life lesson. It applies to so many things. It applies to marriage. It applies to jobs. You know what I mean? If you fold, as soon as things get tough, boy, it's going to be tough. Going to be tough for you because there's definitely some storms on the horizon out there. But listen, tell us, somebody's listening and they really like what they've heard. Give us the Belhaven website and what would be the social media that you have that you'd recommend that they plug into? Is it Instagram? Is it YouTube? Tell us how someone should
on social media. It's all of them. We cover the waterfront, and so you'll find us on any social media. As my daughter told me the other day, students don't use Facebook anymore. You're just talking to their moms and dads. And I said, yeah, I know I am, and that's okay. So if you want to connect with me on Facebook, you can find me there, LinkedIn, wherever. But Belhaven is on all social media. But the main website is belhaven.edu, and it's Belhaven with one L, BELHAVEN.edu for education. And if you go there, I'm real easy to find. And you can also find that paper I talked about, The Real Cost of College. It's 17 pages. Anybody doesn't have to read the whole thing, but it's divided into sections where you've got areas of interest. You might want to look at that paper, and also tell about, of course, our double major free and our free master's degree as well when they go to the website.
Roger, thank you so much. I really appreciate this, and I know our listeners will as well. So I wish you well in managing COVID and managing those students, and your passion emanates, and I can definitely see why you received the award that you received from the Educational Magazine.
Oh, you're so kind. This has been a treat for me, and I'm thankful for what you're doing. If we can help educate families on how to make a good decision, it makes all the difference. So I'm really grateful for your podcast and your message out there.
Thanks, Roger.
Let's take a break to learn about Mark's recommended resource for the week.
Friends, I'm sure you noticed, hey, where was the recommended resource in the middle of the Dr. Roger Parrott discussion about Belhaven University? Well, we're doing something a little different in this episode. You're going to get a recommended resource, but it's 13 minutes long, and it's really a second interview. I'm partly testing out the idea of doing a second interview on an episode to see how you like it. But the main reason is to expose you to two friends of mine who have combined together on a joint venture. Now, our audience is really diverse, and we normally don't share a resource that targets a particular race or ethnic or religious group like South Asians or Hispanics or Jewish students or Presbyterians. But the two gentlemen whose interview you're about to hear, two people are pretty special, so they combine their talents on this joint venture, specifically targeting Black families. I wanted to give them exposure to our listeners. So listen and enjoy. Friends, I'm with two very special people I've known for a while. And welcome to the Your College Bound Kid podcast here. Tim Fields and Shereem Herndon Brown. How are you guys?
Doing great. Happy to be here. Thank you for having us.
Nah, really happy to be here, Mark. Really happy to be here. We appreciate the invitation.
My pleasure. So Shereem and I go way, way, way back. We were both trained with Susan Tree at the Westtown School and known Shereem for about 21 years. Went on to, he did college counseling at Westtown. He did admissions at Georgetown, and he's got a strong independent educational practice going as well. But this is our recommended resource section. So we're here to talk about both a book and a podcast. And then Tim's been great. Tim is the Senior Associate Dean of Undergraduate Admissions at Emory University, and he's been at Emory for about 17 years. I've known Tim for maybe about eight to 10 years. I've actually sat in CBE sessions, community-based reading sections with Tim, and got to see him in action over there at Emory. So appreciate both you guys. And I want to hear about the exciting ventures that you've collaborating to work on. So who's going to talk about the book and who's going to talk about the podcast?
Well, Mark, again, thank you so much for having us here. We are two parents, educators, and authors, right? We both have self-published books independently. And after knowing each other for a few years, came up with the idea that there was no book specifically targeted to, I'll say, the Blackish population, the Black middle class, the non-first generation Black families that we wanted to do. And, we really did a lot of research into what was out there. I think initially, let me take a step back, it was that during the summer of 2020, during the racial reckoning of America, whatever you want to call it, I was really struck by the Black at IG posts that were having a lot of these private schools. And the consistent theme through all the different schools was how they felt about their college counseling experience. And my blood was boiling. I'd experienced it as a college counselor and seeing how some of these independent schools in particular devalue some of their students or undermatch is the word we're going to use appropriately. And I called Tim. I was like, yo, man, like, you went to Morehouse, I went to Wesleyan, HBCU, PWI. He went to public schools all his life. I went to private schools. We both have twins. But we had so many differences in our educational backgrounds that we thought we'd write a book about college admissions, the Black Family's Guide to College Admission, a conversation about education, parenting, and race. But at the core of it are two educators, two dads, two Black men who are pulling from their own personal and professional experiences to share with the population that we believe needs to hear it. So we appreciate the opportunity to talk about it on your podcast, but more importantly, we really encourage anyone and everyone who is a Black person, or if you know Black people, Black children, Black educators, please get this book in their hands. We really want it to be a part of the canon of college admissions literature and can be used as a training to help counselors be the best they can be.
Yeah, let me say a couple of things about that, Shereem. Obviously, I'm Black. My original co-host was Black. And when we started our podcast, we didn't know what our audience would be. But we've had a survey of 206 of our listeners recently, and only 1 in 9 of our listeners is Black. So we're not really reaching that population that you're going after. We weren't sure, who would be our listener base. And so there's desperately a need for that our podcast isn't necessarily reaching that audience the way you are going to be in a real focused way. And so, I know there's a need for that out there. Fantastic stuff. You've been silent over there, Tim. Chime in.
The podcast is an extension of the book. I think we understand that the book is going to come out. We want to introduce a lot of information, but then there's going to be follow-up questions. People are going to want to know more. And so we have started a podcast called Application to Admission, where we're talking about everything that begins at when we introduce college to our children. And we think that needs to be in middle school, if not earlier, exposing them, walking them through the college admission process, bringing on guests to talk about both the high school side, the college side, financial aid, community-based organizations, parents. There's so many different voices that are in the college admission, the enrollment management space. And so we want to make sure to have a platform. And, our focus is Black families, but, we're not limited to that. But we just know that there's an information gap that a lot of Black families that exist with a lot of Black families. And so we want to make sure to provide a platform for those, to share that information, but also those in the field. One of the things is we know there are several college admission, college counselors, independent college counselors that are Black throughout the country that help students. And so we know we don't know it all. We learned a lot from you, Mark. We learned a lot from our colleagues throughout the country and world. And so we just want to create a platform to continue to share this information about kind of the college admission experience specifically from for Black people.
I want to highlight something. I think that there's a dynamic here, particularly given the resurgence of HBCU popularity. obviously beginning with Kamala Harris and extending to everybody from Deion Sanders to to Michael Strahan being on Good Morning America. I mean, we've all known for a long time that Oprah went to Tennessee State, but one of the great things that Tim brought to this book is that he was able to identify on Inauguration Day when Joe Biden got sworn in, how many different Black people were up there and how they all came from different educational backgrounds. So we opened the book letting you know that success and education do not all look the same. People come from different walks of life. We had someone from South Carolina State up there. We had obviously Barack and Michelle Obama up there. You had Kamala Harris, HBCU. So we had all this different positive, Black, beautiful, educated energy that we want to make sure is pervasive throughout our communities. I mean, throughout the book, we kept saying we're doing this for the culture, right? We took surveys, we did group sessions, marketing sessions, like where we were focus groups, where we would listen to what were on people, Black parents' mind. And we, processed that. We regurgitated some of it. We answered some of the questions. We have a frequently asked question section. So the bottom line is that we really want to do this for people who need it. And Tim and I are both in our 40s. We have children. My son's a senior in high school. His children are 9. My daughters are 9 as well. So we're going to be in this for another 10 years, 8 to 10 years. So we figured, with our cohort, our generation of people who went to college are now having kids who are going to college, what's the process look like? So that was really what drove the book. And thankfully, Johns Hopkins University Press was equally as excited to hear from us. And we've got a great, reception from counselors, Black, white, green, and yellow, because they really feel like there needs to be a well-marketed book that explains more about HBCUs, understanding what the role that PWI serve, and then just some of our own interpretations of how that affects Black people.
Yeah, and we have a lot of college counselors that listen to this, and not most of them aren't Black, but this could be a real good source for them to understand Black people better, so they can help any Black kids that they happen to work with, whether they're school-based or IEC or CBO. We have a pretty large counselor group that listens to this podcast, and that was another reason why I wanted to have you guys on to introduce these resources to the college counselors that listen to our podcast.
Yeah, Mark, just one other thing that I really want to highlight that is, behind the book and the podcast is we really want to redefine what success looks like in this process. Too often success in this process is defined by what school did I get into? How was that school ranked? How much scholarship money did I receive? But we want to take a much more holistic approach towards this. It's like, finding the right school, knowing that, Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson, she went to Harvard. Vice President Kamala Harris, she went to Howard. 2 high-powered African-American women, 2 different paths. And so really thinking about just not saying, because of this school name, this is going to guarantee success, but really thinking about, where is this school at? How much is it going to cost? What is the career trajectory of me going to this school? What is my mental health? Will I be the only one at this school? And asking all those questions in early. And ultimately, we think success is having choices. And so we want to make sure people have choices throughout this process to begin early. And then, ultimately, that will define success and not just being attached to a name.
Awesome. So I want to support you guys in whatever you do, not just because, I've known you guys and I know the kind of quality work that you put out. I'm very excited about this project. Talk to our listeners again about how they get the book, because I know the book's about to be released in September, but people can pre-order it. Walk our listeners through how they can pre-order.
You can go to Amazon or BarnesandNobles.com and look under the Black Families Guide. If you just type those into the search at the top, it'll pop up, or College Admissions and Black is actually, if you type in College Admissions, it might even come up because we've been getting a lot of traction on it. So it's actually, the algorithm is putting us near the top of the most popular college admissions books right now. So, we feel very, very fortunate to have not just people pre-order the book, but, school districts reaching out to us to buy the book in bulk and to distribute it to their parent body. Obviously, counselors to use it for their parent body and their students. We're speaking at several events over the next several months. We're doing a panel presentation at Westtown School, my alma mater, later this month in May. That we're going to speak at IECA. We have 2 different opportunities to speak at Martha's Vineyard this summer. We're going to speak at several homecomings in the fall. So we're really, Jack and Jill presentations. We're very, very focused on making sure people have the information in their hands. And as Tim said, we know that we know a lot, and we definitely but we don't know everything. And we want to make sure that other admissions officers, particularly Black ones, really want to be a part of this movement, helping families to understand the choices. So you can always go to our website, which is understandingthechoices.com. Follow us on any social platform, Understanding the Choices, Instagram. Join our free Facebook group, Understanding the Choices, because the book is just the beginning. This is a book that is specifically for college admissions, given our professional experiences. But we really believe that Black families need to understand the choices that they have for their young people. So we're hoping that this is just the beginning of the conversation, the dialogue that we're going to have over the next several years.
And you can always go to you can always go to any platform for podcasts and just type in application to admission and it'll pop up. So we're on all platforms, excited about that. Like Shereem said, you can order the book on Amazon, on Barnes & Noble, The Black Family's Guide to College Admission, a conversation about education, parenting, and race. And follow us up on all platforms. At Facebook, we have a Facebook group, Understanding the Choices. You can go to our website, understandingthechoices.com. You can follow us on Instagram at Understanding the Choices. And so, Understanding the Choices is our umbrella organization that we want people to understand the multiple choices they have throughout this process that begin as early as inception all the way through your job after college. And, what are the decisions that you have to make throughout? So we're excited about it. We appreciate the platform you have, Mark, you supporting us. And, we definitely look forward to supporting you in any way we can as well.
Awesome. Keep up the great work, guys.
Thanks a lot, man.
All right, man. Thank you, Mark.
My pleasure.
Next week in the news, is it ethical to withhold admit rates? Jim Jump Inside Higher Ed. Our question from a listener is bonus content. Every 10th week, Mark has bonus content where he shares something burning on his heart, and every 10th week, Lisa has bonus content. The other 8 weeks, we take your questions. Mark will share tips on selecting teacher recommenders for your teacher recommendations. Our interview is with Rod Skinner, the Director of College Counseling at Milton Academy in Boston, on why is it so much harder to get into a selective college these days. That's part 1 of 2. At our college spotlight is the University of San Diego with Sylvia Borgo.
And friends, remember, college is not a prize to be won, but it's a match to be made.
Amen.
And it's not where you go that's going to count, but it's what you do when you get there, and it's what you do when you get out of there. See you next week, everybody.
See you next week. Happy Mother's Day.
Happy Mother's Day. Spoil your wife, men who are listening. And that's our show. A big thank you to you, our listeners, for tuning in this week. If you find this podcast helpful, please follow us, and you'll get every episode as soon as it is released. If you're interested, there are a few ways you can really support our podcast. You can click the share button and send it to your friends and acquaintances. You can help us pay our staff and our expenses by donating on our website. You can write a review for us on Apple or Spotify. I'm the producer of the podcast, but we have a fantastic team of 14 people. Shout out to our co-host, Dr. Lisa Ruff, and to our In the News co-hosts, Dr. David Williams, Susan Tree, Vince Garcia, and Julia Esquivel, and to our substitute co-host, Sylvia Borgo. Our sensational sound engineer is Nemanja Modvich. Our amazing music is from Victor Allen Weeks. Marketing designs from Kimberly Blass. Lily Ruff manages our Instagram. Our image editor is Talha Khan. Joy Stucker does our website episode updates. And our webmaster is Stylianas Dimitri. If you want to have a coaching session with Lisa or me, just text me at 404-664-4340. If you have a question you want us to answer, or if you have a recommended resource or an article you think we should discuss, just send it to questions@yourcollegeboundkid.com. By the way, check out our website where you'll find lots of content that is not on any podcast app. Our website is yourcollegeboundkid.com. If you want to learn about other hot admissions topics, follow us on Twitter at YCBK Podcast. We think of you as our listening family, and we look forward to meeting again with you, our family, every single Thursday.